in their industry role. And so, Noemi, would you like to address that for the group?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. In my case, and this I think applies in different ways depending on how advanced you are in your career. But in my case, there were three aspects of my professional experience that I believe have been very valuable to me. One of them, I think I mentioned earlier, this concept of really exposing yourself to international experiences, whether because you are international and you're coming to the US, or you've lived and went to school in the US and are spending some time abroad. And I think I've heard some of the panelists already doing that. So that would be something that, hey, if you haven't done that, I strongly recommend you to do that because it will serve you very well. And today, nowadays, with the COVID-19 situation and us all going virtual, you can take a role, maybe in an international setting, even without necessarily moving. You have to deal with work hours and time zones for sure, but even working with different type of people can add to your cultural experience and to the different cultures of the companies, team dynamics, and things like that. So to me, that's a key one. The second one that I always recommend, even if you're very strong or particular in your science field or technical area, is always try to have a job at the headquarters and a job at the on-site, facility, if you will, or a particular function. I think having a professional that has both the tactical ability to execute, but also the strategic mindset to make decisions make somebody very attractive for every position and eventual growth in a company. So to me, if you haven't had a chance to work in headquarters, try to get there. Or the opposite. If you've never been on a site and you can always think very abstract and strategically, you really want to do an execution job. And that's particularly important, I think, in the pharma industry, where you have a lot of the regulations that kick in. Maybe my last one, it's a little bit maybe more focused on the financial aspects, but if you really want to be a CEO of your own company or of a big corporation like the ones that we're representing today, I strongly encourage you to try to have experiences in both sides of the equation. You really want to be close to sales and understand the customer mindset, right? In our case, the patient many times, or in Juan Carlos' case, customers, right? He spoke about the ability to understand what is it that they need. On the other hand, it's always good to have the experience of what is it that it takes to make it. What's the expense side of a P&L? When you think about it, if you've been, a decade, let's say, in your role, and you know how to manage a P&L, that equips you not only for running a big job at a big corporation, but it equips you to have your own business. And I think that's important. If you can try to have experience in those sides of the equation, I think it prepares you very well for the future.
Thank you, Noemi. And Lindsay, please.
Yeah, so to further expand on what Noemi stated, I think what was really helpful was really trying to think of end-to-end oversight. So I started out in R&D and then went to development because I really wanted to understand how do we get large molecule and also small molecule biologics through the pipeline. And that means starting from phase 1 clinical trials and what is expected to get your investigational new drug, your IND, accepted. And then also, what do you need for launch readiness and commercialization? And then I think the last part that I'm starting to work on is how do you understand the quality aspects of biotech? We're in a very regulated space for good reasons because we need to make sure that our medicines are safe for patients. So being in the quality space, I'm understanding what do we mean by data integrity when we want to introduce a new QC test method. What are the barriers for using technology that's already being done in the development space, such as next generation sequencing? How do we make sure that we have the good manufacturing practices in place so that we can use these technologies? And I would say on a more personal soft skills note, how do you feel more comfortable in who you are so that you can show up as an authentic leader. So my father's Mexican American. He kind of grew up with the idea you have to assimilate to be successful. Just put your head down and work hard, and you will be recognized. And nowadays, what I really appreciate is courageous authenticity. And if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage America Ferrera's TED Talk. My identity is my superpower. And it's through my participation in employee resource groups, such as the Latino professionals at Genentech, Viva, and also we started a SACNA's professional chapter at Genentech over 5 years ago because we saw a need for creating space for belonging and how you show up as yourself. So I'll also put it in the chat, but I would say I am my strongest as a leader when I show up authentically because everyone relates to that on a personal level.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lindsay. And now, Itzia, would you welcome again? I'm glad we were able to work out the technology and you're with us. But please, you want to fill in the blanks a little bit about what got you to your current role there at Merck, but then also anything you'd like to talk about your growth and understanding of your personal, professional identity in industry.
Sure. Thank you very much. Sorry that I just joined now because of the technology issues, like you said, but I'm happy to be here. About myself, well, my at Merck started 13 years ago, but not with my career path, right? Like I think I have to start from who sits here, right? Like I like science, I like engineering, so I did my career is in chemistry, but my PhD is in material science and engineering. So my first job at, at Merck was in material science and engineering as a researcher, right? So then I went to another job, like after like 7 years. I said like, well, I do like the technical stuff, but I will really like to become more globally sound. So I went to my chemistry. I tapped into my chemistry, and I said like, well, could I use my chemistry, and can I use my Spanish? Because I mean, I was born in Mexico. I'm a Spanish fluent speaker, so it was like, can I help with Latin America, for example? And like, well, if you want, there's a role, and we can basically create it for you. So I became the supply analytical science leader for Latin America, just like that. Like I literally just asked for that, and it was created. So it was a wonderful position for me. From there, again, like I was thinking, well, I'm helping all this quality in Mexico and Puerto Rico and all these countries, where I'd say like, well, if I'm helping quality, why not becoming somebody from quality? So the words from Noemi really sound back, because it's like, well, okay, I went from a global role, I was in a technical role, right, like a headquarters role, right, like, and then a supply role, but then it's like, well, I want to be at the site. So I moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania just to become uh, a, um, a group leader now. So I'm leading all the laboratories for a site, for a Cherokee site here, and again, like it was literally just realizing what was my need and what I wanted for my career, and then expressing that and expressing it to many people so that it can happen, right? Like I just I knew that I wanted to do it. I just didn't know how, and I didn't know how to express it. So I think the most important part for me was talking to people. It's like, this is what I want to do. How can I do it? And a position open, and after like a year of conversations, then I was able to get here. So for me, that identity, that understanding I needed, and converting into my career path, that's what really helped me. And also using some of those extra talents, if anything, like the language and when I work in Latin America for the Latin American market, that was for me what really helped me in my career to become what I'm now, and leading all the laboratories. So Lindsay, you mentioned it, all the data integrity, all the new initiatives for everything. It's just amazing to see that transformation now at a site that allows me to see that, right? Like I went probably the opposite way. Normally people go from a site to the corporate roles, right? Like I went from the corporate role to a site role, but that doesn't stop me, right? Like I feel like I'm going to building up that skill set that I'm trying to get from every single place that I touch, and from all this multidisciplinary education that I have, and also from multidisciplinary approaches. I think I'm getting all that covered. You mentioned also, Noemi, financials, right? Like knowing the financials. Before I didn't have any idea of financial stuff. In a role in the site, you can get that exposure. So I'm just like hearing what you're saying, me, Lindsay, and really it touches me because it's very similar to my experiences.
Thank
And I'll
you
stop
very
there.
Thank you, Itzia. That was wonderful, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us. And so we've got some questions from the CareerCon attendees, and I'd like to encourage those of you who've not asked questions yet to go ahead and submit them. We'll try to get to as many as possible in the next 35 minutes or 33 minutes or so. But what I did want to propose a little bit different format, in that rather than ask every one of our panelists to address every question, I'll throw the question out and then we can free for all. And panelists, you all unmute and jump in as you'd like. And you can all unmute simultaneously and debate it if you'd like, or just take turns, whatever. But why don't we begin? Cindy Cohen asked a fabulous question, and that is, many of us in the science field are introverts and have trouble connecting with people in large venues like conferences or big online meetings too. Do you have any advice on how to overcome that to initiate conversations and network?
One response that I got at one of our trainings, when you have that kind of situation, they all say, when you're like, especially live, right? Like there's a lot of people and you're by yourself and you want to get in, right? Like you just go to that group and I say, may I join you, right? Like that was what was recommended. May I join you? By then you can just get in, and then they will stop whatever they are talking, and then they will talk to you, right? Like automatically. And I think that have helped me a lot, because that was always awkward just to get in and then just join, but then nobody sees you or nobody asks you anything. So you just like, however you come in, you go out. But if you do that, may I join you? Then it gets a response. So try it.
I'd also jump in. This is Lisa. For me, when I find myself in a situation like that, I try and find a common denominator. So I might walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, what did you think of the last, session that I just saw you walk out of as well?" Or if I'm in a group setting where there's a multitude of large companies represented, and I see that somebody works at another bank, asking them, "Hey, how are things going, at B of A or at Citi or at Chase?" So for me, it's always been, can you find some sort of way in which to open a door, open a window that allows somebody to open it on the other side, and you can find that footing that can become that catalyst for conversation, and hopefully will lead to more things from there.
Thank you, Lisa. Any of our other panelists like to jump in, provide any suggestions on how those introverts amongst us, we can kind of push ourselves out of our comfort zones and get out and connect and network? Okay.
I think I was going to mention, I think Lisa and Itzi nailed it. I have to say I am an extrovert, and it's still difficult when you go to conferences. And, and I was told once by a head of sales, very much like Itzi and Lisa explained, find something, first of all, to get some sort of attention to you. And second, to connect with the other person, whether it is a conference or you're going to sell a business plan to somebody and you walk into their office. Look for that picture. If they're fishing, they like to fish. Look for that, outfit, they like a particular color, but really find a common ground. I think that's what I use. But I did want to share that it's also uncomfortable for me still today. I think I'm much older than this group. Still today, when I go to conferences to connect with people, it is difficult to come out of one's shell. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think, and this may just sound really elementary as an elementary suggestion, and I too am an extrovert. But when I get to the big conferences, sometimes it's a little intimidating. But one of my natural reactions is to try to sort of hang with people I already know, and who I've already met even and connected with, and if I can kind of remind myself, okay, I've connected with them or I'm comfortable with these people, but I'm going to go off now by myself and just force yourself to kind of just venture out there and see what happens. And I know it can be scary, but if you can just sort of remind yourself, don't just hang with the people you know all the time. Anybody else before we go on? I've got another excellent question. You also, of course, feel free to circle back to that. But Angelica Riojas asked, how did you overcome needing industry experience before joining industry? This is the chicken versus the egg type question. I like to think of it. But yeah, how did you get your foot in door in industry if you've been working in say a lab at your university and don't have industry experience? What's any advice for our attendees, panelists?
I'll jump to that one because I really, really, really struggle, especially because I didn't have a network in the US. No, like my parents had friends or friends of friends. No, I just came to the US for my PhD, in which I was focused on the PhD and nothing else. So I didn't have a network. I wanted to go to industry. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know how, and everyone was asking for experience. So that relates to the previous question. Conferences, networking events, try to meet someone. It was pretty random in the American Chemical Society, which is a sister organization from SACNAS. By the way, I saw a person, she gave a talk, she's amazing. I waited in line, and I don't remember the question that I asked her, but she wanted to follow up with me based on that. That opened the door for interviews in industry. I didn't get the job, but I got that my network started growing. So look for those opportunities. And it is hard, and I get it. And now when I am as a manager, I try to switch those things because I was there before.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Anybody else like to? How can if you don't have industry experience already, but you want to go to work in industry, what can you do?
So I would say, in addition to the networking, see what you're eligible for. So I always encourage students to look at biotech industry internships because often hiring managers are more willing to take a chance on someone for an internship and help give them that experience rather than if it's a full-time position, because hiring managers are still very risk averse and they like to hire what they know and what they have experience with. And we're still trying to change the mindset and highlighting how do we hire for capabilities. But you have to start somewhere. So I always say, if you're current undergrad or grad student, do your internship. If you are recently going to graduate, also look to see if there's any type of short-term position or contract positions. So often, if you can demonstrate you at least have skill sets in the labs from either academia or other types of internships, that can help be a starting point, especially if you're thinking of more R&D type of settings where maybe it's not a requirement that you need to have worked in a good manufacturing practice labs. And then now I think a lot of biotech industry is realizing that we need to set up more rotational programs and industry postdocs as well. So now we have more rotational training programs for recent PhDs, as well as industry postdocs are very common. So often I'll also encourage people that may not be eligible for internship because they've recently graduated to see if they would be interested in an industry postdoc, because at least once you start at least getting some type of internship, then that will help you to network internally and see how to expand out your skill set so that you have that relevant experience. And then I can also put in the chat a link to careers at Genentech to see what you can be eligible for, because applications right now for summer internships are on a moving basis. So if you haven't locked in an internship, do so now.
Yeah, I think to your point, Lindsay, I think February is a very important month, typically for most companies, at least in the science field. By the end of February, most internship close. But to keep, I think we have different members in the audience, right? I think we have a few that are undergrad, we have graduate school and postgraduate school. And there is typically, Amgen, very similar to Genentech, we have internships in different areas, right? Students that we target when they're in their senior year, when they're in their postdoc, et cetera. So make sure that you do a little bit of that homework. And if you take it a little bit of the science field, let's say you like science, but you love technology as well, or you're a business person, or you want to be close to the customer, always think about the capabilities, because I think to Lindsay's point, we are evolving, and as corporate America, if you will, we're evolving in every industry to where capabilities are becoming more and more important. And I can tell you, when I switched from the telecom industry to the biotech industry, what I put in my cover letter was, I don't have experience in biotech, but I have experience in regulated environments. And they called me, and I had a very good interview explaining how I approached certain things in very regulated environments, even though I didn't know as much about biotech. And gosh, am I glad I made the switch. I love biotech now. So highly recommended for an industry to go in. But certainly capabilities are key. But in more technical settings, I think internships and the explanation that Lindsay gave is fantastic, because it does come in handy.
Thank you, Noemi. And I wonder, Lisa or Juan Carlos, you all are coming at it from different industries, from financial services or technology, and with the HP cases, but not to ignore you too, Itzia, from Merck. But is there any angles you all would like to address about getting your foot in the door if you're leaving school without any relevant industry experience?
I think that I look into the career internship. That's the best way to do it. No questions asked about it. But the other thing, when they don't have internships, at least I look for them to have experience in the lab, participating projects, I don't know, robotics or whatever you do, but something besides your classes. If you do just your classes, you don't show that you have any working experience. Even if it's academic, some working experience is needed for me.
Thank you, Juan Carlos.
Yeah. I was
And
also gonna recommend. Oh, Lisa,
go ahead.
go ahead. I can hold the thought.
I was just going to add into what Juan Carlos said. I think the internship is absolutely one of those big, steps that you can take to demonstrate experience in a area outside of academics and outside of the studies. I also would highly recommend that as you're looking at those internships, take a look at the different facets that they might bring you. I know when I applied for Wells Fargo, someone said there's more to Wells Fargo than what's at a branch, and the person that takes the money on the teller line. And I think that there's some places where we may shut the door and say, I don't want to look there, or I don't want to go there because of whatever the reason that the case might be. When if you really take a big step back, it could be a turning point in your career. So for me, like Naomi, we're a very highly regulated company, and that gives me skill sets that I can transfer into other industries and other segments. So again, really kind of taking opportunities that maybe at first blush don't seem to fit with what's in your trajectory, but asking yourselves, can this add a tool to my toolkit? Will it challenge me in a particular segment that is transferable? And kind of looking at it from multiple angles, I think is one of the recommendations I can't stress enough. That we have to be looking at not only what we want today, but what we want in the future. So be open to those different opportunities.
Thank you, Leticia. Please.
Yeah, I was gonna mention also, for me, it's very important as a hiring manager to see leadership skills. So I'm always looking at that people that have organized sessions, for example, for SACNAS or for other organizations, because that tells you that they can really move people into doing something, or to plan events, or to plan anything that you need to do, right? So for me, if you don't have that experience in a lab setting, if you have that leadership skills, I always take it in account, because it can make a difference. And I was gonna just tell a story, because I have in the lab, I have hired a person that study sciences, but also she was a bartender. And you'll think, like, why should I get a bartender in the lab, right? And I think that there's a lot of skills that are there from a bartender that you will need in a lab, right? Because a quality lab, you need people that is able to address all the experiments at the same time, and be always focused, be always trying to please the client, if anything, right? So all these skills, I'd say, like, well, I mean, the science for sure, and how to treat people, and how to serve to different things at the same time. I would love to have you in the lab. And I made the offer, to this person. And I'm really happy with her job and her skills and what she's bringing to the table. So don't be afraid to have different skills, because you never know how we can apply them, and especially leadership skills are welcome anywhere.
And she knew how to mix the right substances together and experiment to find the right thing that makes people that works. Thank you very much, Itzia. And where did my questions go? Oh, here they are. So I've got another question posed by the attendees from Gabriela Recinos, is asking, how did you leverage your skills and experiences in the early stage of your career? What worked and what did not work? So how did you leverage your skills and experiences in your early stages? Who would like to start us off on that?
Start quickly. What worked is having an understanding of virology and trying to see how do we keep plasma products safe, knowing what our population is and having a tiered approach, so that we're just not relying on one attribute for viral safety, but we have orthogonal measures. So it was really helpful to share my molecular experience in viral safety, and also understanding what could potentially work in manufacturing and what couldn't. And then what didn't work was really understanding how to write for your audience. So there's definitely a skill set in writing and how you communicate. And so if you're communicating to an audience of experts, you can kind of write up papers very easily. But if your audience is not an SME, but they have a general knowledge, or your audience is the FDA, I almost see it as like, how do you write as if you're playing poker and you don't want to show all your hands? You want to be very persuasive in how you write. So I think that just gets by with really go seeing and understanding. So the more you have opportunities to learn from other people, it kind of helps. So when I realized that the writing I did in academia is not going to cut it for biotech, I went to see people in other departments just to kind of understand what is a writing style for business, how do you format things, took classes on how to improve on my writing, and that made a big difference.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
You know, if I could go next, I think this is a wonderful question, by the way, and it really makes you think. And I'm sure every one of us could have a different response because it's really based on your personal experience. I think, by the way, what Lindsay mentioned about communication is critical, and I'm still learning after 25 years in industry that I could always improve from that end. But two things that come to my mind that I've learned with time that I thought I was doing very well at the very beginning, but now I'm realizing maybe not. One of them is, quantity versus quality. And I have to say that this generationally is changing. But when I started working, I thought if I put in the most hours and I work the hardest, I'm the best one. And that's not really how it works. And again, generationally, this is changing. But one thing that I discovered was that the quality of your work really comes through in how your work-life balance is set up, how empathetic you are with others that work around you. How can you carry on a message that represents a good business decision without really, getting to sensitivities and things like that. So that's something that I've learned with time, that you can come in, be very eager and solve a lot of problems for a group of people, but in reality it's a lot more than that, right? It's the way that you influence and the way that you work and the quality of your contributions that make it very important. And the other one, I think I've sort of spoke to it already, but on the leadership side in particular, I think inspiring others is very important, whether you're early in career or more advanced in career. And I think Itzia's comment earlier about leadership experiences are critical. And I think there's a question that says, how do I really stand out in an internship to make the internship a job offer? And I really think it's through leadership. And it's not leadership because you have people that report to you. You have, it's leadership when people don't report to you. How do you go across, think end to end, approach others that are not really thinking the way you're thinking, but you find a common ground to connect with others? So that's something that I have to tell you that I've, and I think COVID-19 helped me make that click on, the importance of empathetic leadership. And I can tell you, I'm happier at work and I feel I have a team that is inspired because of that. So don't wait too long to practice that in your career. Do it right away.
Thank you, Noemi.
Yeah.
Anybody else like to address that before Lisa, it looks like you're.
Yeah, I'll just add on one other thing is, I think what Naomi and Lindsay highlighted are spot on. The only other thing I would add is don't be discouraged. If something doesn't work in one setting, it maybe look at how you approached it. What could you change or modify? And perhaps try it again. I'm not saying try everything 2 and 3 times over, but certainly if you find yourself in a situation where the message you were trying to convey, the solution you were trying to communicate wasn't well received, ask for feedback, find out why it wasn't well received. I think Juan Carlos kind of hit on this. Ask for feedback, find out what the gap is, and then figure out how do you make that modification or change so that you can hopefully tackle another challenge that should arise in the future.
Thank you, Lisa. Why don't I jump to the next question if I could? And this one came from Litieta Angeles Perez, and she asked, "What things can one do as a graduate student to prepare for a position in industry?" And then I think she kind of made it into 2 questions. Or after you've finished your PhD, what things can you do to help you prepare for a position in industry? So anybody want to provide some guidance on that?
Yeah, I think we already touched a little bit of that, right? Like,
yeah, it's very similar to the earlier question, but kind of
internships,
right.
And the networking part, right? Like that's very important that
Agree
you
with it,
have to
yeah.
be doing.
No, not much different than the other question. Is you're undergrad or you're a grad student? No difference.
So that
helps is understanding if your PI has any experience in supporting grad students or postdocs that want to go into industry. So some PIs, maybe they don't have those connections in industry, so they don't know how to facilitate your development. So it depends on if you're an early career grad student, then you have the opportunity to find a PI mentor that can help bridge those connections. Or if you already know that your advisor isn't in that space, how can your advisor help connect you with other professors who may be consulting for biotechs or startup? So I think that's the one thing I wish I would have learned, because my postdoc advisor was great at getting his people into academic positions, but he didn't have the connections for industry.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes.
Anybody? Itzia?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that now that Lindsay touched the topic, right? It's very difficult or very strange that a professor will recommend you to work in industry. They're gonna basically recommend you their path, right? So look for your own path. What you want to do, right? Like, in my case, I knew from the beginning I wanted to go in industry, and of course, if you're a PhD student, they just want to let you go to a postdoc position. So I did do what my PI told me, that like go get a postdoc. So I went to ask for the postdoc. I got it, and then I was interviewing at the same time because I wanted to work in industry secretly, right? And the postdoc mentor, when I went to him, I said, well, I'm gonna be very sincere with this. I'm interviewing as well. I know that you accepted me already, uh, but I mean, there's a possibility that I get the job and I don't stay with you for this postdoc. And what he said, well, where are you applying? I was like, well, I'm applying for Merck. And he said, you know what? If you get the job and that's what you want to do, don't think back, because everybody here of my postdocs will kill themselves for a job like that. So you get it, you go. Don't even think about me. And I was like, okay. So you need to get that idea. If you really want to go to industry, it's your own dream. It's not your PI's dream. It's your own, and make it true. And even if they have a different idea, don't listen to it.
Thank you so much, Itzia. And looks like we've got about 7 minutes for 3 questions. And so we'll do a little bit of, y'all can help me rapid fire through these, and we can always circle back and take a deeper dive into them as well. But Ana Nunez Castrejon asked, how do you interview when you have imposter syndrome? I'm supposed to sell myself, but I'm constantly doubting myself. That's a great question, Ana. Thank you for that. Who wants to provide some tips or pointers to Anna on that?
I can go, because I was just interviewed last week for this position, as I told you before, about managing managers. I am not ready for that. I've been barely managing individual contributors for a year. How am I gonna manage managers? But they asked me to do it, so I must do it. The thing is, before the interview, you don't have the job. You don't have anything. So what is the worst thing that can happen? That you don't get it. However, you're gonna gain a lot by just interviewing. You're gonna get the feedback. So always, even if you don't get the job, reach out to the people that you interview with and ask for feedback. I always give feedback to the people even outside of the company, because I respect their time. So if you gave me some of your time to interview with my company, I will give you the time to provide feedback. That's one of my values. But you have nothing to lose. And I have this imposter syndrome all the time, but I have nothing to lose. So I might as well do it.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. And Lisa?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always encourage people when they're interviewing for me or I'm mentoring somebody who's getting ready for an interview, I always suggest you have to help the words on the page come to life. And so be confident in what you're bringing to the table. If you're getting that interview, usually it's because you have something that they're looking for. And that isn't always so obvious to us. So I think somebody else on the panel said, you could bring great leadership skills that you really saw come to life in an academic setting, in a work group that you were part of. Likewise, it could be for me in the team and the organization that I get to lead at Wells Fargo. So I think, have that confidence in being able to show up and to promote yourself. And it's really, if you can be confident in sharing your experiences, your capabilities, and your abilities, as we talked about earlier, there's something that you can be bringing to the table, and recognizing that none of us are the same. We all have different experiences, backgrounds, histories of where we've been, what we've done with our lives and our careers. And so really capitalizing on how that is going to have an impact or an effect on the company that you are applying for can really be a magical formula. I also strive to encourage people to, again, speak up, because it can be often difficult when you say, I was in this group or I did this thing. Well, help me understand that. What did you really do? What was the role that you played? And regardless of what the role may or may not have been, when you can capitalize on that and bring that to life, the person who's interviewing you has a better sense of how you may fit into the equation or the team or the group that they're trying to build out. So again, don't hesitate to sell yourself, because otherwise, like Juan Carlos said, what do you have to lose? It's a chance.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And let's see if we can get to another question from Salvador Cruz Matus. Asked, what types of behavior or characteristics are sought to transform an internship into a job offer? So while you're interning, what kinds of things are the companies looking at to think about keeping them on full time? And how can you extract the most juice from your internship experience?
I recently had a summer intern last year. So I think as hiring managers, we understand that it's a weird thing because of COVID, everyone's virtual. And what I think is really challenging for recent graduates is that it's hard to demonstrate lab experience if all the internships are virtual. So what I did with my intern, who's also a Secnista, so I was very intentional in who I wanted to bring on board. I made sure that I helped facilitate networking. So I didn't have her just meet with me and my team. I made sure she was meeting with people in other departments, and then that would bring about organic connections with other people. So then that way, at least through her internship, she was also able to take on another opportunity to do some project management work for another group. So then she was able to expand out her skill set that way. So by being able to expand out her network during the internship, branch out into project management, people on that team were actively looking for to help her for that next job. So then they were able to say, there's openings coming up, I'll put in an internal referral so that way she could apply. So that was one way that I think worked out really well, is just bridging those connections, because the people in those departments will know what opportunities are coming up. And then it's also very strong when you can get an internal referral rather than just applying coldly through the general website, because you never know if your application will even get looked at by the HR business partner, or if it just gets automatically screened out. So those are some ways that you can kind of help in turning intern to full-time.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was fabulous. And good to have a helper on hand too at all times. And Well, let's see. I think in 1 minute we can get to the last question I've got here is from Jessica Gonzalez, and she's asking, have you ever hired somebody who just did okay in an interview, but they just had an outstanding resume and recommendations and stellar accomplishments, but the interview was just sort of awkward and there was some anxiety. Any tips or recommendations on that before we go out? And then we are at our time. I hope they don't kick us off here. Who wants to give that in a 1-sentence answer on that one?
I can jump in, and I have to say yes. The answer is yes. I've hired people that did not have good interviews, and that happened this week. Very bad interview last week. It was the person at the bottom of the list. The individual reached out to us 2 days later and said, hey, I really didn't do a good interview. It was an off day. My kids, blah, blah, blah in the morning. Yada, yada. It wasn't a good interview. I don't want to sell you based on my interview. I want you to reach out to the people that know me. And we did make a couple of phone calls, and he was a fantastic candidate, and we did extend the offer. So it happens. It happens more than you would think. So just make sure that you're proactive and reach out. If you think that you're the best candidate, you probably are the best candidate. So it's a matter of making sure that others see that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Noemi. And thank you, panelists. It's been a wonderful hour and a half or so that we've had to spend together. And it's been nice visiting with you all, and everybody, attendees, CareerCon attendees. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions and for your attention. Thanks to you all panelists for your companies and their support for you doing this wonderful work. And I'm so grateful to Genentech, Amgen, Wells Fargo, HP, and Merck, and for all of you panelists. And with that, I know we're about to end. We're probably going to cut us off or kick us off anyway. But thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your CareerCon event.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good one. Bye-bye.